Good morning. My name is Nathan Wiebe, and I'm the pastor here at the Wetaskiwin Church of God. Thank you for tuning in, whether it's YouTube or Facebook or our website. I'm so glad that you've chosen to tune in and hear what the Lord has for us today. I want to start with a little riddle. What moves fast and slow, yet always keeps the same pace? Time. Time is a gift, unlike any other. You know, it's limited, it's finite, it's temporary, and once spent, we cannot buy more. Yet it often feels unlimited. It's one of those weird things. It feels unlimited, it feels like we have a lot of it until we don't. And when we don't, that's when it really hits us that, time is running out. Once in a while we get those little reminders from an experience that we have maybe with a friend or a loved one, or as we get older in life, there's little things that remind us that time is fleeting. I remember one time I was visiting a cousin whom I hadn't seen for, 3 or 4 years, and I went and visited her at university in London, Ontario. And we had a good lunch. We went and got something to eat and then went back and hung out at her place for a bit. And we decided to watch a movie. So we watched a movie, and then it was pretty much time for me to leave and head home. And so as I was driving back, I just remembered thinking man, I have not seen her in 4 years. Why did I spend half of my time watching a movie I'd already seen? What a waste of time. I should have used it better. And this is a calendar of the weeks in a 90-year-old life. And so I want to see, there's an arrow here that you can see that points to where I would be, which is just under halfway. And it's quite something to see your life represented in weeks in these little boxes. Now, one calculation, as I was looking at some websites, one calculation was for an 85-year-old life, and you put in your birth date, and it said that I have 15,526 days left. Now, you know and I know that we don't know how long our lives will be. We don't know how many days we are going to have on this earth. But if it was 85, then I would have 15,526 days left, depending on when you watch the video. With young children at home, we're often told by other people, cherish these times. These times go quickly. Next thing you know, they're out of the house or they grow up so fast. And I can tell you, there's days when it does not feel fast. But if we look back through our photo roll a little bit on the camera or on the phone and you see some pictures, you're like, boy, yeah, it does move pretty quick. It feels like time is going quickly. Well, I want to resume the series that we started at the beginning of Lent that was called I Like Giving. I Like Giving. And I'm basing it somewhat off of a book that I read called I Like Giving by Brad Formsma, but also on the scripture from John 3:16 that says, "For God so loved the world that he gave." And so it says, the rest of it says that he gave his only son that whoever believes in him would not perish but have eternal life. But I wanted to focus on the giving part, to say our God's essence is to give. His essence is love. God is love. And because he loved, he gave. And so if we want to get to know God better and we want to even maybe be like God or be God-like and follow in his ways and do what God does and do what Jesus did, then we should be generous people. We should be people who like giving, who show our love by giving. So that's kind of the basic premise for this series. And it's not just about giving money. And that's the thing. As soon as a preacher starts talking about giving, people are like, oh yeah, hide the wallets, look out, he's after our money again. That's not it. Money is just one of the things that we have to give. And I think that we are often cut short because we think that the only thing we have to give is money. And if we don't have money, we have nothing to give. But that's not the case. We each have something to give. There's lots that God has gifted us with, that God has given us, and opportunities that come. And in one of the first sermons, and I'd encourage you to go back and listen to it. We don't have a video of that, but I'll link to it in our email and maybe even on YouTube, so that if you want to go back and listen to that, you can listen to the first sermon. But each one of us has something that we can give, and God has given us lots that we can give. So we're not going to just talk about money. There's going to be a number of elements, and that's part of why this is a series. It's not just give money. So today we want to talk about how we can give time. And the reality that time can actually be one of the most valuable gifts that we can give. You know, we all have the same amount of time in a day, or in a week, or in a month, or a year, and it can only be spent once. And so we need to use it wisely. We want to be good stewards. We want to use our time wisely so that we can honor God in how we spend our time and make an impact in this world. So what comes to mind is the scripture from Psalm 90, and I want to read that for you. Psalm 90, verse 10. Verse 12. Psalm 90, verse 10 and 12. Verse 10 says, "Our days may come to 70 years or 80 if our strength endures. Yet the best of them are but trouble and sorrow, for they quickly pass away, and we fly away." And then verse 12, the psalmist writes, "Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom." That's what we want to focus on today. That prayer, that we're asking God that He would teach us to number our days properly, in accordance with His will, in accordance with His perspective, so that we might gain a heart of wisdom, that we would use our time, that we would be able to give of our time with wisdom, with God's wisdom. So how do we do that? How do we gain a heart of wisdom? Well, the first thing is that we need to recognize that there are seasons in life. There are seasons in life, and not every season is the same. You know, different ages and different stages present different opportunities. So I remember a story that I heard from a missionary once, and he was sharing a little bit about him and his son. They had adopted a boy from Costa Rica, and him and his wife were raising them and partly in the United States, and this man had been a teacher. And he said that when the boy was young and he would come home from work and his son would want to play. And he said he would actually, he would put off the work that he had to do for school and he would play with his son and then later when his son was in bed, he would focus on the work that he needed to finish. And sometimes that meant he needed to do some on the weekend, and that was that. But he said his son just loved to play with him, and he would say things like, "Dad, you're my best friend. Dad, I want to play with you all the time. Dad, we're going to be best friends forever." And he would hear his son say that, and he said one time as his son got a little older, he said, "Look, son, actually that's not going to be the case. At some point, you're going to want to do different things, and you're going to have different friends, and that's okay. But you're going to not think of me as your best friend someday, and at that time, that's fine." And so there was this reality for both of them that the dad understood that there was a season of life that he needed to be his son's friend, and that was going to change. And he had seen it in the kids at school, and that he wanted to invest as much as he could while his son wanted the same investment. Because then later on, as kids get older, so I hear, I don't have a teenager yet, but as kids get older and they get into the middle school and teenage years, the idea of mom and dad as a best friend doesn't resonate so much with them. They're often out making friends with other kids and learning other skills and doing other things. And so sometimes it's really hard then for a parent to try to play catch up and build a relationship in the teenage years when the kids don't want it, because they weren't able to, or they didn't prioritize and do that when they were younger. And so anyway, that was just a lesson that missionary had mentioned that he had learned. And, Leslie and I were just early married and didn't have kids, and so he was passing on a little bit of his wisdom. So we need to recognize that there are seasons in life that will provide us with unique opportunities in order to use our time strategically and to set our priorities in a way that will pay off in the long run. And sometimes when those seasons are done, you don't get those opportunities back. You don't get to see those people anymore. You don't have the same friendships in place. And so we need to recognize that there are seasons in life and understand what they are. And so we need to ask, what are the current opportunities in this season of life? Whether you're young or old or somewhere in between, what are the unique opportunities for you to give of your time in this season of life? Number 2, how do we gain a heart of wisdom? Not only do we need to recognize seasons, but we also need to identify priorities. We often buy into the idea that we need to use our time efficiently. We often start to talk about that as time as being efficient or inefficient. And we can kind of slip into the idea that should be the highest priority, that efficiency should be our highest priority. But I would say we need to focus on setting our priorities straight. That our time and our use of time should be based more on our priorities rather than on being efficient. And so if we identify priorities and we set them straight, then I think efficiency will be a byproduct. But if we set efficiency as our goal, then we may or may not actually get to our priorities. And there's a good chance that if we're worried about being efficient, that we could totally miss our priorities, actually. And that we would not be pursuing a heart of wisdom. We could miss out on God's priorities and the things that He would have us to do. And so we need to identify priorities. That's the number 2 thing. I remember when I lived in Guam and I was a missionary there, I spent 5 years there because that was what my work visa allowed. And upon returning, I attended seminary, and I was asked by one of my professors about those 5 years, and they said, what did you learn there? Tell me about that. What did you learn there? Or was there a lesson that you learned while you were in Guam? And I said, I think the main lesson that I learned was that ministry equals relationships, and relationships equal time. Therefore, ministry equals time. All three are kind of equal. That ministry takes time because ministry is about relationships. And so, we need to invest and to be about God's work, not just as a pastor, but I would say for you as a Christian or someone who wants to pursue Jesus further, if that's where you are, part of what we're called to do is build relationships. That's not a waste of time. That building a relationship is rarely efficient. It takes lots of time. It takes time for you to get to know them, for them to get to know you, for you to do things together, to work on projects together, to play together, to celebrate together, to mourn together. Now, we've been building a relationship as a pastor and church family we're in our 7th year. It'll be 7 years in December. And, it takes time to build trust. It takes time to go through those ups and downs of life. But there is a joy through that we can say we have a relationship. And I hope that you can say that you have a relationship with me and that it's good and that you want that. And that I would be able to say the same for you. That relationships take time, and through the years we build on that. And it's like planting seeds. We're coming to spring and the snow is finally melting, and many of you will be planting a garden. But when you plant those seeds, you do what you do. You prepare the soil, you put in the fertilizer, you dig the holes or the rows, and you plant those seeds, but eventually you back off. You weed the garden once in a while, but the sun and the rain and the water has to do its job, and those seeds grow. And that's the same with relationships. It's the same with how we do ministry, that it takes time. And that God has called you to do ministry and to give of your time, to build relationships in this season of life. And it's going to change as you go. When we look at the example of Jesus, right? Jesus was not... one of the things that you've probably never heard Jesus described as is efficient. At least not in our eyes. Because what Jesus walked everywhere, right? He didn't ride on a horse. He didn't go on a cart. He didn't run. The Bible never says, and Jesus ran here, and Jesus ran there. He walked. He spent time. He spent days and nights and evenings and early mornings and weekends and weekdays and Sabbaths and festivals with those disciples. When it came time and he started his ministry, those disciples were with him like 24/7 for the 3 years that he walked this earth. That was how he made it. They watched Jesus. They listened to Jesus. They did what Jesus did. And so we see that Jesus invested in people by giving them time. I think of the story of Zacchaeus. Jesus walks into this town. Zacchaeus is a tax collector. He's hated by many, by all really. He's too short to see what's going on, so he climbs a tree so that he could see Jesus. And Jesus doesn't say, Zacchaeus, what do you want to know? Or what can I teach you today? He says, I'm coming to your house. Let's go have a meal. He wants to spend time with him. Because people who spent time with Jesus had their lives changed. By the end of that meal, Zacchaeus was a transformed person. He was willing to give back more than he had taken from people. He had stolen a lot of money from people, and he was giving back way more than what he took from them. One meal with Jesus, a little bit of time invested. What a payback. This man's life was transformed. I think about Jesus hanging out with children. The disciples tried to keep the children away, and they tried to stop them. Hey, don't bother Jesus. He's busy. Hey, stay away. But Jesus is like, no, let them come. Jesus had time to hang out with the children. I also think about Jesus being called, and now this was an insult because this was from the religious leaders, but he was called a friend of sinners. Friend of sinners. Well, why would he be called that if he wasn't spending time with them, having meals with them, showing compassion and care for people that the religious leaders had disdain for? And the religious leaders looked down on them like, oh, they're sinners. But yet, that's not what we see Jesus doing. Jesus had compassion. Jesus spent time with enough that he was labeled a friend of sinners. Giving time is a powerful way to show love. Giving of your time is a powerful way for you to show love. To show love to God. I mean, maybe you give some more time to the Lord and you spend more time listening more to him, to reading the word, to worship. And God will use that and honor that and transform you in those times. Maybe part of that comes out of that time, also comes the ideas of who you should be spending time with. Because giving time is a powerful way to show love. Right now, during this COVID pandemic, we have a really unique opportunity. We have a unique gift of a reset. The reset button has been pressed. And this is unparalleled. Most of your parents have never had this before. But we get this privilege, this opportunity to hit the reset button. Now, your schedules have been cleared, right? Your kids are not in any sports. Some of you are out of work. Many of you are still working. The agenda is cleared. There's nothing happening at the church. There's no programs. There's no church services. The social clubs that you may have been a part of or the coaching that you were doing, that's not happening. The friends that you wanted to meet at a restaurant, you can't go. You can't meet. And so everything is stopped. Your calendar has been cleared, other than work perhaps. So what are you doing? What are you doing with that time? And I'm not talking about being efficient, but I'm talking about using the time to evaluate our priorities, to examine our priorities and say, is how we're spending our time and the things that we would like our priorities to be, is that how we're really spending our time? You know, there's kind of two different things. There's how we spend our time and how we think we should be spending our time, and what we would like to prioritize. And you know what? I mean, for many of us, that often doesn't line up. We get into that pinch and the grind and the daily routines and schedules, and next thing you know, we're running like chickens with our heads cut off, and we're so busy. But we have an opportunity. The reset button has been pressed, and we can examine our priorities in a fresh way. And I want to encourage you to do that. And if you need some perspective, go back to your January or February calendar, see what you spent most of your time on. Look at your calendar now. It's very different. And so I've come up with just a few questions that I want you to prayerfully consider in light of this opportunity and that the reset button has been hit. What or who are you uniquely positioned to give time to right now? What or who are you uniquely positioned to give time to right now? Number 2, has God been calling you to start something or stop something during this reset period? Has God been calling you to start something or stop something during this reset period? And then along with that, have you done it? And if not, then I would encourage you to. Number 3, what is one of the unique opportunities you have in the current season of life? You have a season of life that you're in. Maybe you're retired, maybe you're working. Maybe you're raising kids, maybe you don't have kids yet. Maybe you're not even married. Maybe you're single. Maybe you're widowed. I don't know what season of life, but each of us has a unique opportunity. And what is it? Identify what is one of the unique opportunities you have in this current season of life. And lastly, what makes our family or what makes your family unique, and how can you leverage that for God? Each family is different. Each family has unique skills and desires, and you're different than the family down the street. So how? How are you different? And what does that mean for you? And how can we use that for God? You know, what does God want to do with you and your family? And what does that look like? What makes you unique, and how does God want to use you and your family to give of your time and to prioritize your time? You know, we want to sow seeds that are going to bear fruit, not just in our own lives, but bear fruit for God's kingdom, that will represent Him well, that we would be salt and light in this world and represent the Lord and bring good news of a loving God to those who don't have it, or may not have heard it, or may have forgotten it. Would you join me as we close in prayer? Lord, as your word says in Psalm 90, you have been our dwelling place throughout all generations. Before the mountains were born, or you brought forth the whole world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. Show us the people and the things you want us to prioritize, and may they be in line with your priorities, Lord. Most of all, teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Amen. God bless you as you pursue that heart of wisdom this week.